Distinguished audience, distinguished speakers, welcome. I wish for a good afternoon for each and every one of you. I hope you and your loved ones are all okay. You know, the pandemic actually has changed our daily lives, but also our working lives as well. The world has accelerated and there is a need for rapid adaptation, and therefore the elements of the ethics and compliance principles of the corporations are changing all the time, and we turned into a living organism. I think one of the most important points is actually diversity and inclusion, especially the managerial positions and the ethics compliance departments of the corporations are all playing a key role, including the human rights. So as the Turkish Ethics and Reputation Society, we're just trying to provide you a platform to assist you in this process. This time, our leaders of the working group for diversity and inclusion invited several colleagues to share the best practices of our members, and we have very distinguished speakers today, and we are together so as to listen to them. First of all, an introduction for the ground rules. If you have questions and answers, you can use the Q&A button. I would be happy if you also refer your question to who you are asking the question. And I wish for a good webinar. I don't want to take too much of your time, so I would like to give the floor to our speakers, and I would like to give Filiz, Toprak, Esin, and Meltem Azbazdar, the member of the executive committee of the society. Well, I was just looking on the LinkedIn about a poster, and the day of the motto of the day from Vietnam, and the master said awareness is like a sun, and it always has changed what shines upon it. Awareness is very important. I think that's what we have actually recognized as the working group, both as the Ethics and Reputation Society, and of course as the working group. We just wanted to raise awareness. Just a reminder for the first comers, we as the working group mainly organized a workshop, and we identified a roadmap with wide participation, especially with regards to diversity and inclusion. We aim to raise awareness, and at the same time we are just willing to prepare a guidelines that will guide everyone, not only the Ethics Summit, but at different occasions we came together and discussed inspiring practices. Of course, just to get rid of the bad practices, what we can do, we discussed it all together a couple of months ago in an event in June 17. We actually from Sabancı, Coach, Borusan from Important Holdings representatives joined us. Today, global companies will be taken into account about global rules, how they are localized. You know, this can cause sometimes some trouble. It's very important to internalize the identity of the corporation. So today we'll be discussing all these issues in this event, and wish will be very successful. And I would like to give the floor to my dear colleague Meltem. Thank you. Welcome again. And as both of my colleagues mentioned, with these types of webinars, especially there are some local and international practices, and from the perspective of diversity and inclusion, what best practices we have, and we're just trying to inspire each other and learn from each other. And it's really very valuable for us, for you to be here. Why? Because we are just trying to give support to all these activities. Of course, we just thought that we would contribute to further improve these issues. After saying inspiration, what I would like to mention is, as you all know, especially just like our personal journey, also the corporations, so as to have sustainability, they're all looking for meaning. Before they declare their profitability, they just wanted to identify their raison d'être and to support their employees on this journey and for their recruitment, for the newly recruits, they just wanted to mention about their own identity and attract them. I think diversity and inclusion is a part of it. I mean, between the employee and the company, there is a goal that was set and try to reach to that goal. And I think that's an interesting field. It's not a new topic actually, but still we have a lot to learn from each other. And that's the reason why I am just looking forward to listen to our distinguished speakers. As I told you, they are not declaring their profitability or so, but when, again, Global Impact Index, and especially in the Diversity and Inclusion Index, especially the companies who are at the top level, especially, there is a 45% of a more increase in their market share and 70% more actually they have at the same time growth, and therefore the return on investment is quite high on diversity and inclusion. I mean, in terms of diversity, inclusion, and meaning, or it doesn't look like a goal maybe, but it actually has quite a good impact on the outcome, as we all agree. I don't want to take too much of your time, and I immediately would like to give the floor to our guests. First of all, I want our colleagues to introduce themselves and answer our questions. We will start with Aysun. Welcome. Welcome, thank you. Very briefly, introducing myself on the top of what you mentioned, according to worldwide surveys, those who are more diverse, more inclusive, these types of companies, their turnovers increased by 67%, and it's actually a fact. And as a Prysmian group, we're pretty much aware of this fact, and that's how we act. Well, in general, I would say, and I have an HR history of 26 years. Started at the university as a consultant, and then I was on the other side, at the corporate side of the desk. For the last 12, 13 years of my career, mainly with the global players, and mostly retail and regional HR. And for the last 3 years at the Prysmian Group, quite a different industry, I would say, and I've learned a lot from the Prysmian Group. Since March, I am the Global Diversity and Inclusion Director of the Prysmian Group at the global position, so I'm trying to wear two hats at the same time, and I'm trying to serve both to my country and to the overall group. Great, perfect, thank you. So let's start with the first question, and then I will move on to Fulya and Miray. You know, since the pandemics, it looks like it's a bit obsolete, but this is still the case, distant working, hybrid working that we started. How diversity and inclusion agenda affected from this, and how you integrate diversity and inclusion in a remote working setting in terms of the company culture and values, how it is affected, because we're working at different business lines, of course, and of course the working places and all also vary, and therefore it sometimes makes things much more difficult. What are you doing? I mean, in terms of diversity and inclusion in your company agenda, and during the pandemics, how have you accommodated to the hybrid working system? Thank you for the question. Well, of course, the pandemics actually has too many uncertainties, unknowns, and it started so rapidly, as a rapid onset. But looking at Turkey's condition, at the hybrid working or remote or working that has never been discussed in conventional working style introduced rapidly. It helps us for flexibility. It shows us how flexible we could be and how we can actually possibly shape ourselves. And even if, for example, there is any uncertainty, still we can fit into it. For inclusion and diversity, I think it is from the resource management perspective that I consider it. In resource management, you create resource, you use resource, you reuse resource, and there's sustainability. That is the same for diversity and inclusion. The more diverse sources that you have, and the more you engage them and how effectively you can use it. Now, this was a challenge for each and every one of us. Why? Because again, from Turkey's perspective, as a part of being a patriarchal society, we are a culture with more outcome-focused, result-oriented. The human resources have just started to evolve newly. However, the truth about today is that, looking at the population of Turkey, we're working with the new generation, the millennial, with the Z generation. So I think this actually forces us to be much more flexible. I think this is something requested, right? Absolutely. You have to be flexible. We are asked to be flexible. Absolutely. More visibility, to be heard more engagement. And in this hybrid working model, the biggest challenge is actually touching the people. Again, for the traditional industries, for example, touching human was something expected from the HR. The managers actually had the responsibility to focus on the result, but it's the HR to touch the human. But, you know, human is the most important resource, so you have to make the best use of that resource. And from that perspective, of course, to be more diverse, to be more inclusive and so on, you have to create different platforms. That was a need. And mostly about what we have done so far, we created projects, for example, for more inclusion in the decision-making process or in problem-solving issues or for the development. It is personal and organizational development, communication, and well-being, the three pillars that we have. Well, in parallel to the expectations, we listened to the field by way of different platforms. So we developed a roadmap, a working plan, and at the same time, an action plan or a series of action plans. So we try to adapt ourselves to this. Of course, the values of the company would be the most leading to you. And in particular, we had three main values. We have, or the drive, trust, simplicity, and the trust, two leadership principles that we have. First thing is to empower people, and the other one being the value diversity, and so to listen to more people. It's all about listening, the importance of listening. I think that is the most prominent. So, of course, we create different platforms to listen and to understand. That's what I can say. Okay, actually, a perfect answer to my question in the most comprehensive manner. For your action plans, do you monitor your action plans or do you have any measurements on this? Yes. Actually, call it journey, inclusion journey. We started a journey. It's actually a road to go with a wide participation at different levels of the organization, from the field workers, office employees, and people who dedicated themselves to this. We started a journey. In this journey, by way of engagement questionnaires, these are organized at the global level, maybe like the employee satisfaction, I can say. We've been assessing the feedbacks for the last 3 years with different project groups, and this year we are just much more professional because we also hired a consulting company and we're just driving deep into it. KPIs, we have the timelines. And the Prysmian group for 2030 prepared and published some social targets. In parallel to those social targets, also for Turkey, we have actually identified roadmaps under 3 main categories with 13 main initiatives. Communication, development, and well-being. And yes, we have actually KPIs, targets, and the roadmaps. And yes, every month we have a monitoring and assessment meeting. Perfect. Actually, this tracking, measurement, reporting, I think they're all very valuable. Why? Because for transparency, transparency and accountability is much more improved on the eyes of the employee. This is the only way that we can take further steps after completing all these things. Thank you. Fulya, what would you say on this? I mean, while following your agenda in terms of diversity and inclusion. Yes, of course, introduce yourself first, please.
Öncelikle çok teşekkürler.
Thank you very much for inviting me. In 1999 from Koç University, I had my BS from psychology. I then started to work on the HR and a couple of working as consulting, and I just at Philip Morris for the last 21 years. It is mostly HR and organizational development that I'm working on, and I worked abroad for 1 year for Gestalt coach, and because as you all know, once you start development, I also try to develop myself. Very briefly about myself after this introduction, in terms of diversity and inclusion, and for the hybrid working environment, what steps we have taken. I will mention about this, but maybe a couple of words about the working models of our company. Everything would fit much better. At Philip Morris Sabancı, at İzmir, directly, indirectly, we work with 6,000 employees, and this is a round-the-clock, 7/24 working. Both we produce locally and internationally, and within Istanbul, and also we have direct sales and over 50 distributors and 150,000 dealers. We sell our products, so it's a huge operation that we are trying to manage in here. As Aysun very well mentioned, COVID started at a rapid onset in our lives, and especially while we set up the hybrid working environment for each and every one of them, we had different plans. First, for the suppliers, for example, our factory continued to work and produce, of course, with high safety measures were taken. Everything was so critical, but majority of our employees started remote working. Same for our office employees, and then after we started to declare that we will work online, we removed from our offices and started remote working. The office employees started online, so we actually have already planned in place previously, and we introduced it for the field workers. Those working at the field, especially, it's a majority of the fields were on the site, but until July, majority of the employees at the field started remote working. We already had a digitalized system in place, so we moved at a distance. As Aysun also stated, the health and well-being and satisfaction of the employees were our priorities, and then we collected some feedback and tried to understand what is going on in Turkey, in the world, and then the entire PMI this time we give the name Smart Work to this new working model. At Smart Work, as we discussed previously, maybe what we expected was actually to have the agility, the flexibility, a business model that will provide for this. And then we just think about how we can apply this model in Turkey, and we set up a project group from different units, and especially having representatives of the different units allows for diversity and inclusion. I think the thing that was so important to us was that we listened to our people. For example, on the top of the regular surveys that we perform, once in every 2 months, together with the global questionnaires and some localized global questionnaires, and applied it. And with the data from the field, we identified the requirements, what the sensitivities are, what steps can be taken. We all discussed that, and we took actually good feedback, and we tried to respond to each and every demand and requirement. Thanks to these questionnaires and thanks to the working groups in the organization, we identified different groups and personas. So for each profile, for each group, we identify what requirements they might have, what experiences they have, what they can do about it. And with the feedback from there, we started co-creation altogether. And this enriched us a lot. And, the topic is diversity and inclusion, and it provided for too much data. From time to time, we assign people to do things because it's very difficult to find volunteers to work on this. But I wonder whether you actually had volunteers. I mean, people showed interest on this one. Absolutely, yes. For example, you shared also the questions with us. Maybe, creating it is not an easy task, but it was so exciting. I mean, creating something, imagination, doing something from scratch. How would you do it? Because it is something that you start from scratch. The interest was so high, both at the working group and at the same time we had several workshops, and people all would like to raise their voices because everyone experienced the pandemics at different conditions. Some at home alone, the others together with the family, with the independent ones, children, distant education, and so on. Quite different profiles. I mean, not only for the workers at the factory, but everyone. I mean, we all listened to their requirements, and we received feedback from them. Meltem discussed about the challenges, and you mentioned, Meltem, and we continued with recruitment for the newcomers to the organization. And in particular, once you actually join a new corporation, understanding the culture, the friendship there, meet with the people from the other teams, and experiencing that culture, an important room for development. And we try to take steps, for example, online onboarding programs that we had. With regards to internal communication, for example, we paid more attention than ever. I'm interrupting, but last week in open air, there was an event, and 8 months ago, someone that I recruited from Ankara, and wearing a mask, and came, hello, Meltem, and I said, I don't know who you are, I cannot recognize you. And think about it, I mean, it's just through the Zoom that you meet people, and you seeing someone in 3D, I mean, not an easy task. I could not recognize my colleague. I mean, I just wanted to share it, and sorry for interrupting. Yes, you're right. Aysun touched upon something important. And at Philip Morris, we are the Human and Culture Department. And for customer satisfaction, or with regards loyalty, or the employee satisfaction and loyalty, and he stated that that's the task of the HR. Yes, you're right. We touched upon this a lot. Why? Because as the Human and Culture Department or the Internal Communication Department, even if we actually have several different campaigns trying to create some interaction and so on, but each and every employee is actually directly linked to his or her own manager, one top supervisor. That's the reason why having the managers in the process is important. They have to build more empathy, they have to listen to their employees, they have to be more accessible, what they can do, they have to know what they should do. So we revised all our programs on leadership and took certain steps on diversity. These are the things that we've done so far. And for the managers, so as to make them much more efficient, there are certain performance management processes, as you all know, especially career development processes. As the PMI, we've revised the processes. Also previously we were listening to the employees and of course improving and revising the processes, but especially by taking into account in particular the new working environment, we revise them. It's not only the managers providing feedback to the employee, but at the same time too many different feedback from different channels, and we ensured for more objective assessment, especially project-based works that we have now. So I think we enrich the content a lot. So this is what we focused on mainly. But of course, mostly it is while creating the hybrid working model, we worked on this. From the perspective of diversity and inclusion, there are some other things that we're doing. Maybe in the next question I can answer. How you wish. How you wish. Thank you very much. So, Miray, can we continue with you? Would you please introduce yourself? Welcome, by the way.
Tabii ki, hoş bulduk. Herkese merhaba.
Hello again, everyone. I have to say something. Inspiration is a very strong word. I just will mention very briefly about our journey only. There is a technical problem, I guess. We cannot hear you. Is it much better now?
Tamam, süper.
Perfect. I was saying, I just will speak about our journey, but when maybe just a couple of suggestions that will support your journey. My name is Miray. At Unilever, in the area Turkey is also included, and I am the HR director. Since the 15 years I've been working at Unilever. I mean, I actually grown up there. I did not have time to get bored, both at the local level and at the regional level. I worked in London. I worked at the global position for 3 to 4 years. And then I moved to the supplier chain. And then I started a new position right in the middle of the pandemics, new contracts, and together with the new factories. So I started a nice journey. Now, for your question, I mean, as the panelists are saying, all flexibility, demands, different requirements, and so on, it's the same discussion. Maybe I can add on it with some details. We're not back to office yet. Probably not possible until November, because according to the global rules, they do not allow for any flexibility because of the number of cases. But of course, all our activities are adapted to this. What did we do? Of course, we had several focus group studies, and then I can say everyone actually has different needs, and they are right to have these needs. For example, parents, as you would remember, at the first time of the pandemic, from the screen, a cat was going, or the face of the daughter, and so on. But we got used to it, but it requires some adaptation. So try to find solutions for parents. Or we have some colleagues who are taking care of the elderly, some colleagues who are living alone. Or not due to my profile, but due to my preferences, I also, for example, have different requirements. For example, I actually have to work in a silent environment. Another colleague, for example, is very energetic and would like to have people around us to work comfortably. So for post-pandemic hybrid working environment, and for the during pandemic pandemic working environment, we try to offer solutions for the challenges and try to give as much flexibility as possible. So that's the issue about flexibility. All these workshops and the flexibility issues. I think what I would like to add as a term on the top of this is that everything is so unclear, so uncertain. And even, for example, our employees need trust, and they expect this trust from the company, so they can actually plan for their careers. So we try to give them some long-term projections for the employees. I mean, we're saying everything so clearly. For example, once in every 2 weeks, our general manager announced the company, and we told that everything is so clear, everything is perfect. We give the clear picture of the company and so on. And then looking at the questions and the feedback, we found out that not enough. And we tried to push it. So what more can we say? How we can help our employees to make sure that they get enough information so people can plan for their lives. And each time we pushed ourselves harder, and of course within the framework of certain principles, try to disclose everything to the employees. So this diversity and inclusion, trying to understand different needs of people, be flexible and towards them, both during the pandemics and at the post-pandemics era, would be important and would be leading us on our path. Thank you. Yes, being clear is important. It's all about what the employees are looking for. They would like to feel good and so on. But of course, what they would like to feel is the next thing. They just would like to be okay. And they would like to trust someone. Once they do not feel that trust, how difficult it is. And especially, it is actually much harder from a distance. So it's very valuable to understand what we can do better, and I will give the floor to Filiz for the second round. I will start with Aysun for my questions. Actually, three of you mentioned about flexibility, and the experts are also saying if you would like to have a decent hybrid model, then our lives would be much meaningful, will be much more productive and flexible. In writing that question, especially about looking for a meaning in the company, that's the question I would like to ask. You know, as just like the book Toprak Frankel, I don't want to get into the hard time. I mean, telling about a difficult story there, but I think what keeps people to survive is actually the love that keeps you alive and standing on your feet. We feel like, you know, work life is professional, maybe not full of emotions, but Aysun, you said so nice. It's always HR that is expected to touch to the human, as if other people in the organization should act like robots and there will be no human touch, as you mentioned. So, especially for this search quest for meaning, what is the role of diversity and inclusion for you? Actually, this is right in the center. You know, everyone would like to feel she is unique. It could be either by way of love or respect, or by way of inclusion, or by appreciation. People believe that they are unique, and as my colleagues mentioned, everyone, of course, depending on their own requirements, and they actually would like to feel the being unique. From this perspective, I would say, I think looking at, in particular, as Rumi said, come whoever you are, and you have always you have a seat on this table. That approach, I guess, meets us with diversity and inclusion. I've just seen in the questions as well, it is not only gender, it is not only generation, it is not only about ethnicity or even experience, I would say. Think about the job applications. They're always saying that you should have experience in this industry. Think about the diversity that having an experience in a different industry will bring to your company. Or for the new recruitment, they are looking for a specific school, specific university. And I think this is all due to our habits or unconscious prejudices. Therefore, the search for a meaning or to be unique, I guess, is only possible in environments that get rid of all these prejudices, or in companies as such. From this perspective, I would say it's okay. You show a certain level of flexibility. It's okay. Protecting cultural habits is important, but how about the contemporary requirements? I mean, what will bring me to the future, how I should shape myself at the individual level, at the organizational level, and same that covers the managers and the corporations. I think we should change our perspective, and that unconscious prejudices should go down. And to do so, as my colleagues already mentioned, you have to listen. Create platforms to listen to people. I think that was one of the first things that we did, but it's not enough. I mean, we're speaking about new office environment or new back-to-work policy, both at the global and the local level. That's what we're working on. And there's a new working order, people who can adapt to it, be flexible. And of course, some needs maps and needs groups in need will be identified. We start part-time practice, full remote working practice, or for example, we give administrative leave to some of our colleagues because of their necessities, or we did a lot of rotation, changing positions. I think this era, for almost 1.5 years, nothing has changed in my life. I'm working from home, I cannot socialize, I am under quarantine, I am isolated, I need a change. And the easiest thing is to change your job. That is a fact. I'm sure my other colleagues would agree, but among HR professionals, if just to make a comparison, I think during the pandemic, the rate of resignation peaked. Why? Because people want to change in their lives. And as a corporation, in their career, in their development plan, or in their conditions, if you cannot make a change, then you will lose talent. And we are working on this so as to not to lose it, try to do it with the inclusion group that I mentioned about. And I think we have a new working policy that we're working on. By the end of the pandemic, how our lives will be after we're back at the office. And the groups in particular are all identified according to the value chain of the company. And I think it will show us the way. We try to identify the goals and the targets, which group, which position, which function would maximum use the hybrid working environment, which group would never make use of the hybrid working environment, which would maximize the use of it, and so as to make it fair and, of course, inclusive. I think in taking all these decisions, we have to include all functions in this decision-making process. It would be via education, via panels, via disclosure meetings, and so on. You have to inform others. I think we are not even in the middle of the journey. somewhere between the beginning and the middle, because we have no idea what the next month would bring us. We're just trying to be prepared only. As I told you, in particular, flexibility of different working conditions, the new office environment, sharing the desks, open areas, no more room environments, maybe some working environments based on ergonomics, and to actually have some areas of elaboration that people can be more creative and innovative. Or as an important part of sustainability, as I told you, which is diversity and inclusion, maybe just to be a legacy for the future, what can you do? For example, carpooling. Or for example, electronic bike and motorcycle pooling. I don't know. Those who are, for example, another option could be there is the 70-20-10 learning. That 70 is actually the major focus group. That's where we are going, in my opinion. That's the only way that the employees will feel unique. Same for talent recruitment. I mean, for example, if you do not have the policies to support this, then it will limit you. And I think one thing that we're working at the global level is just to revise the policies all around the world. What I mean is, for example, we have a diversity recruitment policy. As our colleague asked that question, all these diversity groups, it's not only age and generation, disability is a part of diversity, different ethnicity, for example, different races. Or these types of things. I mean, some policies that are clearly identified. Maternal, paternal, for example, leave, they all have to be revised, these positions. Or, for example, harassment policies should be revised at the global level. Disability policies should be revised at the global level. And of course, as you have also mentioned from the very beginning, just like the Ethics and Reputation Society or United Nations Women Empowerment Platform, with all these collaborations, we have to make these things much more visible. But what is more important to me is that in doing so, as Meltem also stated, how we are going towards the results. I think I am proud to say at the Prysmian Group is that for our 2030 social targets, all our social targets, at the same time, it's about the pay policy of the managers. It will directly affect their bonuses. So these targets actually will affect the bonuses of the senior management, which I would say is something. How did they accept it? I wonder. We are actually quoted at the stock exchange, both in Turkey and at the headquarters. That's how we convinced them. Perfect, good work. Thank you. That's all for me.
Çok teşekkürler Aysun.
Thank you Aysun. Fulya.
Burada aslında hani
I'll go back to you. You know, being unique, as Aslı mentioned, I think maybe the reason why we have more resignation is that the employees believe that the company is not fair to them, or they do not work in a fair working environment. In your own company, for being much more inclusive and fair, what you're doing, there is a question at the same time referred to you, and I will also ask that from the audience. Yes, please.
Sesiniz kapalı. Tamam, çok pardon. Eğer şeyden de başlayacak olursak, eğer bu hibrit, özellikle hibrit,
especially in the hybrid model, at the same time it's very important to be fair. I will start with that. To be productive, to make sure that there is flexibility. Smart work, that's what we aim for. It's a win-win situation for both for the organization and for the employee. And to be fair, And we have three priorities. The first, as I mentioned at the first round, we continuously listen to our employees, but listen to them actively and by taking action reactively. While listening to Miray, I remembered the monthly meetings of our employees, for example, listening to all the questions and answering all the questions. I mean, for example, not only at the local level, but also at the global level, listening to everyone. That's a new order. Acting in 80 countries, it's a huge organization. We better understand it. And we were actually having meetings with our project groups and so on. But we actually had the chance to be together with everyone, and it really works. Another point is that, especially the search for meaning. From that perspective, we looked at those requirements, the requirements for being human. You know, you also mentioned about love. I mean, love is not actually a part of the workplace. Filiz mentioned that. I mean, because it's actually a workplace. And we're just trying to, you know, make a difference in that area. Yes, it's right. I mean, working life is different from your family, from your friends, and so on, because you spend most of your time in your workplace. I mean, you live with these people and you try to go through the challenges of such an environment. So you have to support a family model in here and try to feel it much deeper. Actually, before we moved to the pandemics, as an organization, we really experienced it so intensely. That's how we continue also at the post-pandemic era. About the quest for meaning, the other thing is the love, that bond, connection, and the other thing is self-actualization, using your actual potential. Try to create a meaning for yourself and try to see it at the integral whole. Looking at this, I would say, so as to build the work and private life balance, and it's okay, you will self-actualize yourself, but in doing so, what is going to happen to my private life? I cannot left my family aside or the beloved ones. And especially, as Miray also stated, initially it was just like a test, and it looks like we all passed the test. I think no need to mention it. Everyone tried their best despite of the challenges. And I think it is not only the steps taken by the company, but what the employees are also doing is also important. I mean, they have to work hard and so on. We organize certain campaigns, by the way, and based on the feedback from the employees, and with also sense of humor, we announced our new working principles and tried to, and this is the new world, the new world, or the code of new conduct, or code of conduct of the new working life, we name it as, how the meetings will be organized and so on. You know, in the past we had a life, okay, maybe it was not the most ideal, but it was different. I mean, people would try to fit themselves into it, but in the new order there are different needs and requirements. In the code of new conduct, we actually just to make our employees smile, and of course we just wanted to raise consciousness on this, because once you do it in the balance between work and private life, it would be possible to have a collective step taken. And by the way, we will be launching a new campaign, and actually I will share it with you, but we haven't published it yet. But this time what we are going to do is, you live but you cannot tell. it is also about
verimli iş
the balance.
alışkanlıklarını
For
biraz
example,
daha
efficient
önden vurmak
working
istiyoruz.
habits that we will
Mesela
focus on.
saat, bizim normal
For
çalışma
example,
saatlerimiz 8-5.
it is 8 and
5'te
5, the
toplantı
working
bittikten
hours.
sonra
After
saat
5, after
koşuya
your
gitmek,
meeting
anlatımlar
is, for
yaşamak.
example, is over,
20 dakika
you actually have
ama
to
ekip
do
toplantıda
jogging
karar
by the
almak,
seaside.
anlatımlar yaşamak
You have to experience it rather than telling it. These are the things that you want for your life. Again, we will pick up all these things and together we'll create it with our organization and try to raise awareness and consciousness. Why? Because this turned into our new working model. This is our new normal. The third area, on the other hand, is especially from the perspective of being fair and also to contribute to being fair and self-actualization. We will turn the changing conditions into opportunity on behalf of, for the sake of the organization. As the PMI, I think what the global career opportunities are the change or the difference that we make. We act over 80 countries, and as Turkey Philip Morris within PMI, we actually are named as a talent factory. For example, 130 colleagues of us are now working at different countries of PMI and are still actively working. Of course, this is a great life experience for them and at the same time a great career. On the other hand, for these types of positions in particular, for example, people would like to go to such a position, but because, for example, of family issues, they cannot go abroad. Now, together with the new model, now the career will also start to change. Why? In a global or in a regional position, it doesn't matter where you work from, because you work remotely. And therefore, even if the family issue, for example, does not allow them to go abroad, now they can get an international position, which is an opportunity for self-actualization of individuals. So I believe it's also very useful for being fair and for self-actualization. On the other hand, of course, turning the changing conditions into opportunity, maybe we can speak about digitalization, especially, for example, field sales required to be on the field all the time in the past. But now, thanks to digitalization, even it is possible that the field work can evolve into a hybrid working model. And as we invested previously a lot in the past, we adopted so easily. I don't know, maybe from time to time, for example, field sales, which women are not that much interested in, would be much more attractive. That's what I can say. And, we just wanted to focus on concrete cases. Opportunity to learn from each other is so good. And we listen to different practices. Maybe you said there is a question. Maybe I can move to Miray, and after Miray completed, then we'll move to the Q&A session. You can actually get, because that was a question that you answered at round 1. And you mentioned about the code of new conduct. I enjoyed it a lot, really. People are all developing different programs, and while I was taking my son to school on day 1, and everything is both actually the same and different. It's the same school, but everything is actually totally different. That's how we live, I would say. But after listening to 3 of you, I understand how important listening is. You're totally right about this. And I think it's so important, especially from your own perspective. With the compliance managers, when I also talk to, what is actually your past character, they're saying I'm a great listener, which is so important, you know, in our own professions or in our daily lives. I think so important.
Miray Hanım, size geçmek isterim. Aynı soruyu aslında soruyorum. Siz de sonuç
Let's move to you, Miray. I'm asking the very same question. I would enjoy it if you also mentioned about your practices. About the practices for questing for meaning. The question, I mean, you know, we're always questioning our lives, not only about our business life. I mean, during that era, we actually challenged everything. You know, it's okay, we make a contract with the company, but there's also an emotional side of it. There is an emotional contract, and of course there is the financial part of it. Therefore, I think if that emotional side a little bit, you know, failed during the pandemic. So again, I will continue with being more clear. I think it was really very important to communicate it. I mean, think about the pandemics. Once everything seems to be not so meaningful, and if you start to question yourself, then we just consider what we can do to make the lives of our employees much better, what we can do for them to self-actualize themselves, just like Fulya, you know, defined it as self-actualization. So try to make sure that they do a job that they want. What would be the best support that we would give to them? As Unilever, especially, we actually have a social role. You know, we're a company with a social target to give something to the society. So for the life purpose of our employees, we organized workshops, and we set up some working groups, and we worked at the digital. I'm not saying we did it perfect and everyone found her life purpose. That's not what I'm saying. It's a journey. I think there's over 200, and how is it possible? I mean, how is it possible, you know, to mention about your life purpose? It's a journey. It's changing all the time. We just, you know, support them in their life journey only. What else we did? Especially for the new recruits, been difficult, quite difficult for them. Why? You know, when you're under stress, once you have concern about your performance, what you do, you act in the way that is most comfortable to you. It's just like autopilot. So while I was working, when I'm just going to ask for a job, probably I would, for example, go to a team member that have prioritization just like me, that I feel much closer. So those people maybe get better opportunities during times of crisis, I would say. And I think the differences are getting wider. And so as to, you know, raise awareness of our managers in this perspective to increase their competencies, we actually had a guidelines for competencies, and to we revised our competency strategy. We discussed it with the board of directors, and of course we had a meeting with the managers, especially during the meetings that the entire company is coming together. As you all know, each and every company has its own principles, but it's really very important that not everything applied at the same level to everyone. What I mean is that for TX, for example, a team member can hold a position for 3 years, but it's possible that another team member get an appointment in a year. The appointment strategies are not applicable to everyone at the same level. As I told you, just to remind them of the standards, and also for our managers, just to help them to maximize the potential of their team members, we ask them to support and to mentor them, and that's the guidelines that we shared with them.
Teşekkürler. Hem açıklamalarınız için hem
Thank
de her
you.
birinize ayrı ayrı sürenize çok güzel riayet ettiğiniz için soru cevap.
Thank you very much, each and every one of you, and thank you very much for being so timely, so time left for Q&A. That's the reason why. Now, if you allow me, I will read aloud the questions. Aysun, we can start with you, if it is okay for you. During your presentation, you made reference to ethnicity. One of the audience asked, from the perspective of diversity and inclusion, would you please share your best practices for cultural diversity as well? Because, as you all know, for example, sexual orientation and gender much more focus. Ethnicity is a much more sensitive issue in Turkey. So in terms of cultural diversity, what you're doing as a group? From the global perspective, I will answer first. As I told you, and when I shared the social targets of the group, we have actually clear-cut KPIs. 2 KPIs for all regions and for all countries, including Turkey, should be accountable for this. The first thing is that 30% of the managers of the company until 2030 will be from different nationalities, ethnicity, and countries of origin. That is the KPI of the group. Of course, it means that same for Turkey. I mean, 1/3 of the company will be from different ethnicities, different nationalities, and different origins. That's the target also for Turkey. The second thing is, again, a social responsibility, but another actual target. This is also publicly announced because we are a quoted company. Local mentorship programs for 500 students from different ethnicities and minorities, and from the low-income group, for 500 students, there will be a mentorship program, and we'll be supporting them as a Prysmian group among the social targets of our group. But of course, as my colleague stated, especially the inclusion, the inclusive language and dictionary and so on, these are good practices, of course. Or, for example, the violence and harassment policy, again, can be included as the good practices, but as a KPI, so 2 KPIs, so clear, I can say targets for ethnicity. Thank you. Quite clear targets. Meltem, any additional comment?
olarak ve global olarak Diageo'nun
Now, at the global level, Diageo, the mission is to celebrate life. And as the Turkish team, we organized a project to celebrate our cultural diversity from all our employees and from their families, from their ethnicity, from their past. We asked them to share recipes. And ethnic feast and a recipe book, a cookbook. It's new now. Hopefully, after this published, we're not just going to, it will be on digital media. And I will share it with those who are willing to have this recipe book. And also, we actually we'll meet around a table with all our colleagues at a feast table to celebrate diversity. How about you, Fulya? There's a question for you.
Çok kalabalık çalışan grubunda bu çalışmaları yürütürken hangi yöntemlerle programın yönetimini sağlayabilirsiniz?
If there's a crowd in a group, how do you manage them? And especially the personal diversities, at which level? I mean, what are the challenges of working on different? Because you mentioned that you focus on different groups. So, what were the challenges? Well. So I told you that we have a project team, and the project team was set up from different groups. That was an important thing. And looking at the persona, we actually pay attention to different breakthroughs, whether, for example, there will be a career, and looking at the life-home cycle, at which phase they are at, according to different design criteria. Especially for the most practical and what would be the step that could be taken into action immediately. It is the work requirements that we focused on. While doing the task, for example, there are some colleagues that should be on the field, or a colleague, for example, is an office worker, but maybe providing a support to the production at the factory. So, like they have to work at the office, or as a part of their job, for example, a person, an employee that does not have to be anywhere or could be anywhere. That's how we did the grouping. Thank you. Miray, a question for you. Both as you are working a lot with the suppliers as a part of your job, and there are so many brands under your group, and so that's a question for you. For diversity and inclusion, do you believe that there are differences from one industry to the other? In some of the industries, it is much more difficult to end discrimination. If yes, what type of action should be taken in such industries or sectors? Well, thank you. I'm personally experiencing it as I'm in charge of the supplier chain, especially focusing on the production and the logistics. In these types of logistics and production companies, it's a difficult task. For example, unfortunately, in the market, for example, let's take women as an example, okay? There are very few women managers in the market. For example, looking for a production manager or a factory director, everyone is going after the same 10 people, okay? Because, the well-trained people are moving from one position to the other at different companies. And there is actually the need for a more structural solution for this. If you're asking me, from the level of high school, from the level of university, we have to find these young people and try to guide them, encourage them in the field of engineering. So we have to make sure that they are trained from the beginning. We cannot change the past. I mean, only, for example, the female rate or percentage of women at certain companies would be high only, or at certain companies. That's one thing. The second thing is that it is 1,500, 2,000 people that we are working with, and it is 3,000 in the outer circle, 10,000 in another circle, and with the suppliers and so on. So it's a huge, family. Same for the other panelists, same for the other companies as well. So the more you consolidate in your own network and the wider impact area that you have, it's much better. For Unilever, for example, a platform that we're proud of, it is We Are Strong Together platform. In our ecosystem, there are several companies, and especially with the idea that our impact area would go further, we actually have something new. So in 2017, we are Strong Together platform. 33,000 employees and almost 100,000 indirectly. We try to build policies, try to give training, but we're doing everything together. I mean, of course, what Unilever can do is limited in terms of its impact area, but once we do it all together and we do brainstorming and act together, then actually make a huge transformation and faster consolidation, I would say, as the main leverage here. Thank you. Fulya, another question for you.
Yani isterseniz biz şimdi kapanışa geçecektik. Son turda kapanış görüşlerinizi
Now we are about to go to the closing. I mean, a last round with closing remarks. Maybe you can both answer the question and then do your closing remarks. How you wish. The question is,
benzetmeye atıf yapmış. Demiş ki diversity partiye çağrılmak,
an analogy. Diversity is just like calling to the party and inclusion is asking to dance. That's a good analogy. And from Aldeniz Aksoy, I actually heard that analogy for the first time. And within the company, as for the employees saying that I do not get what I deserve, what do you do about these employees and how do you manage them? Maybe, I don't know, you can answer now and then go to your closing remarks, how you wish. First of all, this analogy, for the first time I've heard that. I was just thinking in our own organization, for example, diversity is actually like to be invited around the table, and to be able to speak up on that table is inclusion. And I think it's just a similar analogy that we had. If a person is saying that I do not get what I deserve, what we do? That's the question. How we can help them to be invited to a dance. As someone working for the last 21 years, maybe I cannot be objective, but it is dance, color, everything is in here. I mean, the turnover rate, looking at our turnover rates, you can understand that people are dancing a lot. On the other hand, if any of our employees feel that they do not deserve what they do not get what they deserve, there are so many platforms that they can speak up. I mean, you know, you are people who are working in compliance issues, you know it much better than me, and all these platforms are open to everyone. And of course, I mean, there are so many mechanisms. I mean, in terms of the pay systems, about work appreciation, and different degrees of pay, or for example, pay raise, we have quite transparent policies. For career management, everything is so clear. And from that perspective, I would say we do not expect these types of things. But if it happens, then, I mean, there are too many platforms. People can speak up, find a solution to their problems. So that's what I can say. So as the closing remarks then, what can I say? Well, in terms of inclusion and diversity, I think the companies are playing a major role so as to set up this vision, and at the same time so as to raise the bar. But I think it is a part of a culture, and I think also the employees are playing a major role in this. I think it's been 2 years, and we actually have a president in charge of diversity and inclusion working under the CEO, and also at the executive committee of PMI. each and every one of them are sponsoring volunteer group of employees. And we started 2 years ago, and it's evolving. And so there are different groups for inclusion of, for example, women, disability, sexual orientation, and ethnicity, as we mentioned. Therefore, of course, digitalization is actually getting much more widespread. Therefore, someone, for example, in Switzerland at headquarters can also be a part of this group because it's possible to have access remotely. So, of course, it's much more inspiring, webinars and so. For example, with regards to ethnicity, during, for example, Ramadan, from Africa, from a Muslim country, they, for example, mentioned or discussed about their own traditions during Ramadan in Africa, their cultural practices that they share. So everyone can ask questions and so on. In Turkey, for these groups, we adopt them to Turkey's conditions. For example, Women Inspiration Network, we established a group at the global level, and we actually had a Turkey group, and our sponsor is our general manager and the very first sales director, woman sales director, and also woman general manager first. And with a global NGO Catalyst, she's also part of the board, and also they are sponsoring us. Of course, we have both men and women in the group, just like with regards to social gender equality, how we can raise awareness, how we can get rid of our prejudices, different training and some inspiring cases, what they could be. We're working on this, and there is the certification that, I mean, we are the very first multinational company that gets certified for this, and we will get the first audit in Turkey. And then we said, why was the need for this? And then we found out that even in very developed countries, again, especially with regards, there is a difference in pay based on gender all around the world, so it was so meaningful to do this, so as to raise the awareness, and of course for more sensitivity, so important to do so. Again, with regards to women issue, global parent leave, and of course we are, doing quite good for maternal leave, but also for paternal leave, so more leave for, again, fathers. And some other cases, but I think we don't have much time left, so I'm sure the other panelists will also share. And maybe a couple of last words. Of course, in all these practices, it is not only our own employees. At the same time, each and every stakeholder in our ecosystem can be engaged in terms of diversity and inclusion. Why? Because we are touching 150,000 dealers, and 17,000 of those are our women groceries. And again, so our farmers at the same time, majority of them women. So to be able to touch them is important. It's all about enlarging our impact area and to be much more inclusive, to be more diverse, and try to create a better world. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you again. We thank you, actually. So, I will give the floor to Meltem. Then, Miray, before we close, what are your closing remarks? Any good practices, or I don't know, any advice to the audience?
Biraz önce başka bir soruyla beraber aklıma gelmişti. Bir ondan bahsedeyim. Biraz zor bana ama...
Maybe one additional comment. It's a bit challenging topic, but inspired by a question. We all said that by the pandemic, the inequalities deepened, and about empowerment of women, about ethnicity, about coming from different origins and so on. And then we said what we can do. Domestic violence. with regards to domestic violence. We actually had an initiative and we developed a workplace policy. Of course, something that hopefully no one would be in need of, but sometimes people can be in need of. In 2020, we really worked so hard on this. I want to mention that. I know it's a difficult thing. Even, devising that policy was not so easy. With the law department, with the corporate communication department, we worked a lot on the issue. Of course, health, well-being, safety, these are the priorities, of course, and reflected onto the domestic violence policy. I can say a couple of specific things about this. Support mechanisms, psychological support, financial support, legal, and at the same time we covered them. So especially if we have any employee subject to domestic violence, and for example hotline that they can actually access 7/24 free of charge psychological rehabilitation, up to 10 days of paid leave. For security concerns, sometimes they actually have to change their location, flexible working conditions offered, and again accompanying person, security, or for example transfer from home to office, these types of things. And especially for such employees, we make them possible. Of course, legal consulting and especially also some change in the salary cycle, and if they are subject to any such thing. And hopefully we would never be in need of any such policy, but in such cases, at least knowing that you have someone that you can have access to will make you feel so secure. So that's how we did our policy, and since 2020 our employees can have access to this policy. Perfect, it's not a nice thing, of course, but we have to actually be aware of the facts. As a lawyer, unfortunately, that's a fact. I mean, you have to accept this fact and you have to be prepared. It's an area that we're working good work, and hopefully there will be no need for this, but for those who are in need, yes, a very valuable support. Thank you. Actually, we started with Aysun, and let's conclude with Aysun. So, your closing remarks, an additional comment? Yes, of course. Actually, very similar to what my colleagues mentioned, but maybe one a bit different. All around the world, at the global level, we have organized Inclusion Week. We have over 30,000 employees, the entire Prysmian group, but including suppliers, customers, and everyone. A week of an event, and for diversity and inclusion that we discussed about, both internal and external speakers that we included, and especially for example, drama performances by our field workers, some competitions, and very much fat from diversity. And it actually attracted a lot of attention, and everyone was very pleased with this. Maybe as a good practice, best practice example I can give this. And the other thing is, the more, how ambitious, how focused the companies are. You have to join to the global indexes. For global Dow Jones and Bloomberg indices were included in both for sustainability and with regards to diversity and inclusion. We've been subject to audits, so we make self-assessment. I think by global assessment agency, you are assessed, so you understand at which level you are each and every year. Are they doing local audits? Yes, in all countries they do local audits, exactly. I mean, for example, our working hours and For example, Miray mentioned about volunteering projects, about how many working hours of the employees dedicated to volunteer projects. For example, rotation in 1 year within the company, percentage of diversity in recruitment, for example, like that generation and culture and other issues. So besides digitalization, of course, the focus on digitalization is about whether the employees have easy access or not, and both way, easy access to training, for example, or easy access to foreign language courses, for example, e-libraries, access to e-libraries, and it's all actually under sponsorship of the company. It's sponsored by the company, and actually accessibility in each and every area, some investments on digitalization, as Miray also stated. It is not only psychological support, but also financial, for example, for pets, for children, for consultancy in ergonomics, so many employee support package. Again, healthcare packages enriched by the support. For example, ergonomics, again, some life insurance policies. And of course, in terms of inclusion, I would say, collective vaccination for all our family members. So we had several best practices, and we'll continue to have them. Thank you. Thank you very much, each and every one of you, for your support, for your participation. Thank you very much for sharing your best practices with us. Filiz, any final remarks? Thank you all. I don't have much to add. I also would like to thank everyone on my behalf for your contribution, for giving your time, and for your great participation. And thank you very much for the audience for joining us.